Vaya.
So one thing I would like to mention right at this particular point, because sometimes we do these things and we don't really know why we're doing them. So we're chanting this one particular sloka, this prayer, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, because hold on, let me get that out of the way. Because Lord Vasudev, he's the Lord of consciousness. So we're asking him to please purify our consciousness so that we'll be able to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. It's just an interesting little piece of transcendental information. So we're praying to Lord Vasudev, who is Krishna, who's Krishna, but his particular function is the Lord of consciousness. So we're praying to him for that we can place our consciousness at the lotus feet of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Srimad Bhagavatam will be merciful to us and reveal itself, because it's revealed knowledge, reveal itself within our heart. Okay, so Narayan, we pray, say these chants. Narayanam namaskrityam
Narayanam namaskrityam.
chaiva narottamam
Naram chaiva narottamam.
devim saraswatim vyasam
Devim saraswatim vyasam.
tojayam udirayat
Tato jayam udirayat.
nasta prayeshu abhadreshu
Nasta prayeshu abhadreshu.
nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam bhagavata sevaya.
bhagavati uttama shloke
Bhagavati uttama shloke.
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
Bhaktir bhavati naishtiki.
Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and Srila Prabhupada, the translator and commentator. Because if we didn't have his translation or his commentation, what would we understand about the Bhagavatam? Totally indebted to Srila Prabhupada. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Okay, Hare Krishna. So we're reading today from the second canto, and you're in this chapter 10, which is Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And the beginning of that chapter gives the first verse of chapter 10 gives all the 10 subject matters of Srimad Bhagavatam, which I used to have memorized. Atra Sar, yeah, hold on, I'm gonna just say it. Atra Sargo Vishargascha Stanam Poshanam Uttaya Manvantare Shanukutkata Nirodho Muktir Ashraya. So I'm just going to read the translation to the first verse. I understand that we're on the 18th verse, but we're trying to put it in perspective. So Srila Sukadeva Goswami, he's describing the characteristics of this Bhagavat Purana. So in this Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: creation of the universe, that's where we're at now. Subcreation, creation of the universe are the ingredients that are provided by the Supreme Lord. Subcreation is what Lord Brahma takes and manipulates and puts into higher, lower planetary systems, etc. So then there's the planetary systems, there's protection by the Lord, there's the creative impetus, change of manus, the science of God, returning home back to Godhead, liberation, and the summum bonum. So these are the 10 characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam. This particular Purana, this Mahapurana, has to have all of those 10 characteristics in it. So as you're going through your study of Srimad Bhagavatam, this aspect of creation is mentioned over and over and over again. It's a very foundational principle so that we can get a glimpse of the potency of the Supreme Lord and how he delegates authority, delegates the responsibility of creation to different empowered incarnations and manifestations, etc. And also one of the effects of studying the creation is it really gives us a broader perspective of the potency of the Supreme Lord. Perhaps we had some concept of God before we came to Krishna consciousness, before we came in contact with Srila Prabhupada's books. And what can we say? God is great. He created the world, etc., etc. But our understanding of like that type of an understanding is very minuscule. And Srimad Bhagavatam broadens our perspective by giving us so much information about the creation, way beyond my ability, I'll admit right here in front of all of you, way beyond my ability to understand it very deeply. I can read the words and then just pray for some glimmer of understanding, which is what I had to do when I read this verse that you gave me, Hare Krishna. Okay, so we're on text 18, and I'll review it a little bit, just because it's a hard subject to understand, and since you haven't had class on this subject, just a little review would probably help. So text 18, Mukhatastalunirbinam.
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 Jiva tatro pajayate.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Tato nana raso jagne.
Tato nana raso jagye.
Tato nana raso jagne.
Tato nana raso jagne.
Jivhaya yodigamyate.
Jivaya yodigamyate.
Jivaya yodigamyate.
Jivaya yodigamyate.
Mukhatas talunirbinam.
Mukhatastalunirbinam.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Tato nana raso jagye.
Tato nana raso jagye.
Jivaya yodigamyate.
Jivaya yodigamyate.
And anyone who would like to chant, including you, please go right ahead.
Mukhatastalunirbinam.
Mukhatastalunirbinam.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Jiva tatro pajayate.
Tato nana raso jagye.
Tato nana raso yagye.
Jivaya yodigamate.
Jivaya yodigamyate. Thank you. Okay. We'll go for the word then. Mukhata, from the mouth.
From the mouth.
Talu,
Talu,
the palate.
the palate.
Nirbinam,
Nirbinam,
being generated.
being generated.
Jiva,
Jiva,
the tongue.
the tongue.
Tatra,
Tatra,
thereupon.
thereupon.
Upajayate,
Pajayate,
becomes manifested.
becomes manifested.
Tata,
Thereupon.
thereupon. Nanarasa,
Nanarasa,
various tastes.
various tastes.
Jagye,
Jagya,
became manifested.
became manifested.
Jivhaya,
Jivaya,
by the tongue.
by the tongue.
Ya,
Ya,
which
Abhigamyate,
Abhigamyate, become relished.
become relished.
Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. From the mouth, the palate became manifested. And thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. One more time. From the mouth, the palate became manifested, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. And I'd like to offer my prayers to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyana Timirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but Srila Prabhupada so kindly forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I'm totally indebted to him and beg for service at his lotus feet, life after life. Hare Krishna. So here's Srila Prabhupada's purport. I'm going to, hold on, yeah. Okay, I'm going to read the purport here, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a review so that we can focus in on where we're at here in the chapter. Okay, Srila Prabhupada's purport. This gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adidaiva. Adidaiva is the controlling deities, because Varuna is the controlling deity for all relishable juices. So Varuna, being the lord of the water, he's generating the water that covers the tongue, the saliva. So because if the tongue is totally dry, if there's no water within the body and the tongue is dry, then it's very difficult to relish the taste. So that saliva enhances the taste sensation. So, okay, therefore the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all the different juices, of which the controlling deity is Varuna. So it's a step-by-step explanation there. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate being instrumental, they're instruments, they're called adibhutam, or forms of matter. But the functional deity, who is a living entity, is Adidaiva. So that functional deity is whom? Yes? No, the functional deity there is Varuna, Adidaiva. Whereas the person undergoing the function, that's who you are. That's who we are. We're the person undergoing the function of tasting. Varuna is the daiva, a daiva, heavenly, above cause. And the adibhutam is the instrument of the tongue and the palate. Got that? Okay. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth. After what? After the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. That's an essential point here. This is I'm going to use the word development, but it's probably not the correct. This is the explanation of the Virat, the manifestation of the Virat Rupa. Virat Rupa means the universal form of the Lord. Okay, I'm going back. Thus, the three categories are also explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purusha. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely Adiyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. Help, Prabhupada. Okay, sorry. So, our understanding, perhaps you've come across those terms, Adiyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhuta previously in relation to miseries. We have a different, this understanding that's presented here of Adiyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhuta is an expanded version, an expanded explanation of that explanation. It's not our usual understanding. So as Srimad Bhagavatam is always doing to us, is always trying to give us an expanded understanding so that we can, get the concept and its application in its various manifestations. So I'm going to go back, do a little bit of a review. I'm going to go to text number 8, because that's where in text number 8 of this chapter, this is where these terms are first used in this chapter and in this way. So this is text number 8, and then just doing the translation. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the yadiatmic person. So we can see that word, if you look at it, the atmic, atma. So that's the individual person. So the individual person possessing different instruments of senses. We have our different senses: taste, touch, tasting, seeing, touching, feeling, etc., smelling. We have those, and so we're the adiatmic person. And the individual controlling deity of the senses is called the adidaivic. And daiva means transcendental or heavenly. In this sense, it's heavenly. Okay. And the embodiment seen on the eyeballs, what we're seeing out through our eyeballs, is called the adibhotic person. Phew. Okay. So let me just take, it's a long purple. So anyway, that's a little bit of review of what the process. So text 9, all 3 of the above mentioned stages of the different entities are interdependent. We're all like, okay, I'll just read the verse. In the absence of one, the other is not understood. They're interdependent. They're not standalone. The living entity, although we have that misconception that we're standing alone, that's due to our ignorance. But actually, somebody who's in real knowledge realizes that we are totally dependent on every step of the way on higher beings. And ultimately, from the school of bhakti, we're understanding that we're totally dependent on the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. He is providing the structure for our even functioning, even in the material world. And we, in this degraded age of Kali Yuga, have gotten so far away from this Vedic concept, we're thinking that we're just independent and we're functioning on our own strength. And that's a very lonely position there, functioning on your own strength. Anyway, okay. I'm going back to this verse number 9. All 3 of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all. And therefore, he is the supreme shelter. And that was mentioned, supreme shelter was mentioned in the first verse when it talked about the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam, and it talks about the summum bonum. Yeah, Nirodho Muktir Ashraya. Ashraya, Krishna is the Ashraya, and he's the supreme Ashraya, and he's delegating authority and empowerment to different individuals as in the forms of the demigods to help assist him in the matter of creation. Not that he needs the help, but we need the service. Anyway, so ultimately, okay, yeah. Ultimately, what we get behind this very technical information, which is sometimes, at least for someone like myself, it's very hard to deeply comprehend it. But ultimately, what I can understand from it is that behind everything is a person. Behind every act of nature, behind the wind blowing, behind the sun rising, behind the rain coming down, there's a person. And behind those persons that are designated with the Lord's potency to facilitate that activity is the supreme person. And that's information that I'm going to use the word basic information, foundational information is so important. And that foundational information is practically totally lost in modern materialistic society. So I like to try to bring things down to a level that we can, that I can grasp, and maybe that we, so that we have, when we get to, because there's different sections in the Bhagavatams that are, you know, very difficult to understand. And yet there are other sections in the Bhagavatam that are more readily understood. So in order to facilitate our remembrance of the Lord, our appreciation of the Lord, our love for the Lord, our ever increasing attempt, or our attempt to ever increasingly remember the Lord, then we kind of have to put things in a perspective that we can see them in relation to the Lord. So this is what I get from this, what is for me a very difficult to understand the details of it. It's difficult to understand the details, but behind the details is the principle of personality, the supreme personality of the Lord, who is what beyond, even beyond our conception of what we can, you know, of powerful. You know, we can say, yes, the Supreme Lord is very powerful. Yes, he's unlimited. He has all opulences, and he has all strength, fame, knowledge, wealth, beauty, and renunciation. But here we're seeing a practical display of that. And that's why these beginning Bhagavatam, first, second, third cantos, they're all very foundational, so that we can, our consciousness can expand and gradually accommodate the Supreme Lord in all his glories, not, you know, develop an understanding so that we can comprehend the Lord in all his glories, so that when one comes to the 10th canto and there's the Lord acting like a naughty little child, that we don't misunderstand that that person who's sometimes manifesting as a naughty little child is, even in the lap of his mother, the supreme personality of Godhead with all potencies, which he exhibits every now and then when he kills a demon. But sometimes he's just running around the courtyard stealing butter, or etc. So we can, if you think of how Lord Brahma too, here's Lord Brahma, the supreme being, the original being in this universe, manifested from the navel of Mahavishnu, manifesting on the lotus flower. And then what was his position when he came to consciousness on top of that lotus flower? He was quite bewildered initially, quite bewildered. And as he looked about the lotus flower and saw all around darkness in the universe, and could feel that the lotus flower was swaying back and forth due to the winds of devastation that were blowing, he was frightened. And he tried to figure out, who am I, what I'm, you know, he tried to figure out those existential questions that one should ask. Who am I? What's the purpose of my life? How am I here? How did I get here? Where am I going? You know? Oh yes, I almost forgot my thread. Got to go back to catch my thread there, or I'm going to lose track really quickly. So, and then he performed his tapasya when he heard the divine two syllables, ta and pa, and he performed his tapasya for 100 celestial years, which is a way long time. Then what? He was enlightened from within because Krishna was pleased with him. So here's a thing that we can take from that. We need to make our endeavor. We need to make our endeavor to try to understand these parts of all the Bhagavatam, or try to hear about Krishna, understand the parts of the Bhagavatam that are perhaps more relishable, perhaps more easily understood, or whatever. But we take Bhagavatam in total, the parts that we relish, that's great. The parts that we don't understand, we still relish and accept it, and pray that at a certain point, maybe the Lord will bestow his mercy on us and we'll be able to understand. But we make our endeavor, and that's my point. We make our endeavor, and by our endeavor, the Lord will eventually and gradually be pleased. and these things will be more be understood better. So similar back to Lord Brahma's, the example of Lord Brahma on the lotus flower. So then he after he performed his tapasya for 100 celestial years, in some places it says 1,000 celestial years, but anyway, then he understood what to do. Krishna was pleased with him, shook his hand, very good, and revealed to him his purpose and revealed to him how to execute his service. And so then Brahma was there, and the situation was still the same. In the sense, the physical situation was still the same. He was surrounded by darkness. The lotus flower was swaying back and forth due to the pushing of the wind and Lord Brahma. But what was different was his consciousness, and he could understand what he had to do to create the universe as it was before. So even though he was that qualified by dint of his austerities and pure and his purity, still later when he was hearing of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, and specifically at that particular point when he heard about Krishna herding the cows and killing of Aghasura, and the people were glorifying Krishna for having killed Aghasura, he heard that commotion, you could say, or that glorious rejoicing of the demigods and the people in the higher planets that that Aghasura was had been vanquished by the Supreme Lord. And so Lord Brahma kind of gave a peek down what was happening, and he could see at that particular point when he saw the Lord, he saw them sitting with the cowherd boys, eating lunch, sharing their lunch and sharing it with one another, and Krishna taking some food from somebody's plate, or somebody taking some food from their plate and giving to the Supreme Lord. And he thought, is that my Supreme Lord? My Supreme Lord, who's worshipped by the Vedic mantras and worshipped by, eats through the fire yagya? Is that? I'm really not sure. Let me test it. So he was a little bewildered temporarily like that. Point being, that's why we have to make our endeavor, back to the verse at hand, to not shy away from trying to understand these concepts and these verses to our best ability, because that foundational building block of understanding Krishna that's being presented here are so important to build our spiritual understanding, our ever expanding spiritual understanding more and more, so that we are not bewildered by Krishna's exhibition of power. Because it's obviously, if it's possible with highly advanced, great personalities, it's certainly practically it's certainly to be expected that the minute living entity will have that same difficulty or a similar difficulty. So I am totally open to discussion, questions, comments up to this point, points that might have resonated with you, or points that you'd like more discussion on. I'd like to see which way you would like to take this, if you have any comments so far. Anybody?
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, I appreciate. My point that I appreciate the most was like when you said that all this like detailed knowledge is like really helping us to see like that behind everything is a person. So that really like struck me. Like even when I move my hand like this, it's like there is a person behind that movement, other than like me, that I think that it's just me. So I got like a glimpse of like, wow, like so much is like going on constantly, just that we can, yeah.
Yeah, very good, thanks. And it's so conditioned as we are, it's so easy to forget that and think that we're independent. We're the independent doer, but we're not the independent doer. And we're not the doer at all anyway, but anyway, that's another minor point or a detail in part of it. We're not the independent doer. And then another point too is I was just yesterday doing a class on Shishopanishad. In the very introduction to Shishopanishad, Srila Prabhupada talks about the difference between mundane knowledge and the difference between perfect knowledge, knowledge that's coming down through disciplic succession. So this, we can appreciate that in relation to this information. We're not getting mundane knowledge here. We're not getting, we're getting perfect knowledge from perfect persons. So we can rest assured, that the four defects that are characteristic of the conditioned soul, the tendency to make mistake, the tendency to be illusion, the imperfection of our senses, how they're so where even we can look at something and still not perceive it properly with our eyes, and what to speak of without our glasses. Hare Krishna, we need that. But so the mistakes, the cheating, a cheating propensity, imperfect senses, and the tendency to be illusion. These are the characteristics of conditioned soul. But fortunately, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, Sri Krishna himself, and all the great sages, they're not under that influence. So that's another thing that we can cause to rejoice. I also remember one time a person was reading in a different part, but in the second canto or the third, but in the explanation of the creation, where it was talking about the different manifestations of animals, some having cloven hoofs and some having a singular foot, and that person, he kind of like jumped up and said, wow, where do you get knowledge like this of the categories of animals? Where do you get knowledge like this? Nothing compiled in the material world comes close to information on this level of detail, because this is coming from perfected. This is aparushaya, knowledge that's coming from outside, not without, but from outside the material universe. Material universe here is like a little sphere. It has its coverings, and the living entities are living in the higher and the lower planetary system somewhere in this sphere. So inside this sphere of the universe that we live in, a living entity who's trying to, with their own mind and senses, limited as they are, trying to figure out what I'm doing and what's the universe. And that's the ascending knowledge, how we try to accumulate knowledge through our senses and the ascending process. It's so, but being hampered by those four defects that we just previously mentioned, the imperfect senses. And one say, yeah, but now they have these great telescopes that are made by imperfect persons. So they're telescopes just because they might be able to magnify things from far away. They're imperfect because they're made from an imperfect source. So how is it that they're ever going to get perfect knowledge? And that's a subject that has come up millions of times in millions of ways, of how mundane knowledge has to be updated, revised, the revised edition, the updated edition, because now we understand that what we previously thought we understood was wrong, and this is now right. So now put your faith here that now we've figured it out. Well, sorry, it's a little hard to do that, but it's not hard to do that with Srimad Bhagavatam, because of the characteristics of the personalities and in the manner of how Srila Vyasadeva, in his desire to benefit all the living entities, all the living entities in the universe, compiled. He's not the author. He compiled it because that sound vibration, that pure sound vibration, that perfect knowledge is existing eternally, sometimes in a manifested state and sometimes in a non-manifested state, but it's existing eternally. And he, due to his level, his frequency of purity, was able to access that, compile it for the benefit of all, to what? So that we can break out of this limited sphere of the mundane universe and reach the transcendental realm. Any other comments or discussions, or any other avenues that you want to go down and discuss? We do get accustomed to being.
Pay, I have a question.
Thank you.
On text 8, I wanted to see if I'm understanding this correct. Is it saying that the person who, like us, as we experience senses, is different than what we see, like from our eyeballs? Like, so I don't know if that made sense. I think
I hear you. It's very hard to understand. Okay, I'm going to just read the verse for everyone. The individual, this is text number 8 of this same chapter. The individual person possessing different instruments of the senses is called the Adhyatmic person. And the individual controlling deity of the senses is called Adhidaivic. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adhibhotic person. I believe. Okay, let's go. If you go into the purport to that second paragraph, that starts with, I believe it's the second paragraph. It starts with that which distinguishes the controller and the controlled. For example, the material body is called the Adhibhotic person. Okay, I'm going to read it again. That which distinguishes the controller, okay, in this verse, okay, going back to text 10, the controller is Varuna, because he's the controller of the taste on the tongue, okay? And the controlled is the living entity who is tasting, okay? That which distinguishes the controller and the controlled, the material body, is called the Adhibhotic person. The body is sometimes called Purusha, which means enjoyer, as confirmed in the Vedas in the following hymn, Savai Esha Purusho Nan Rasamaya. This body is called Ana Rasa embodiment. Because why? Because Ana means food, and actually technically means grain. Okay, this body depends on food. The living entity, which is embodied, does not eat anything. The living entity, the soul. The soul doesn't eat, but the body eats, okay? Where am I? Lost my place. Okay, this body depends on anything, however. Okay, the living entity which is embodied does not eat anything, however, because the owner of the body is spirit in essence. The material body requires replacement of matter for the wearing and tearing of the mechanical body. That means we can't just eat once. It needs to be replenished and replaced, because once having eaten, we are getting some strength and nutrition from that, and we utilize it by our activities in the day. And then what? We need to do it again. We need to replace, but the spirit souls inside that body, it doesn't need the food. Interesting, huh? Therefore, the distinction between the individual living entity and the controlling planetary deities is in the Ana Rasamaya body. The sun may have a gigantic body, And the man may have a smaller body, but all these visible bodies are made of matter. Nonetheless, the sun god and the individual person who are related as controller and controlled are the same spiritual parts and parcels of the Supreme Being. And it is the Supreme Being who places different parts and parcels in different positions. And thus, the conclusion is that the Supreme Person is the shelter for all. So back to your question. I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry. What's your name?
Kyle.
Hada?
Kyle.
Okay. Okay. So from what I understood your original question to be, you were asking if the embodiment that's seen on the eyeballs is different. And yes, it is. It's different from the who? The real self. The soul is inside looking out through the instruments of the senses. And we're thinking what I'm looking out that you're thinking I'm seeing, I'm this or that, or the body, it's the body that's doing it, but it's the soul. Because that's what Prabhupada says, the basic difference between the live body and the dead body is the presence of the soul. So the dead body has all the senses and everything, but they don't function because the batteries are missing, the spark is missing. It's so detailed, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's so attractive at the same time. It's definitely not my nature to analyze things in this detail, my nature, but it's attractive to see how there's so much beyond, so much understanding beyond what I get.
I'm appreciating it very much because it's like you said, Prabhupada says, without the batteries, the body doesn't function. But that's one way I've heard it in different, not just from Prabhupada in the sense of like new agey ways, like it's the soul. But
Right.
I hear this morning, it feels more, like you said, detailed. It feels more consciously connecting. Like it's like, oh, for me at least, I'm starting to, okay, so my soul is the one that's processing the cells or the senses, and then what's seen on the eye is adibotic. Yeah, there's a lot for me.
It's a lot for all of us, especially myself too. But like you said, like we were talking about, it's so attractive. The details are so attractive because they're perfect details. It's not someone's speculation, whatever, because the details are so attractive, and they can completely confirm all the other subtleties of the philosophy that we've been hearing. Just like we mentioned, I gave the example and you repeated about the batteries. That's a simplistic understanding, but it helps. And especially, but now we're in the second grade, we got to learn not just addition, but now we have to learn subtraction. And then we go to the third grade, and then we have to learn division, and then we have to learn fractions. Oh my gosh. You know what I mean? So that transcendental knowledge is ever increasing like that. Annette, do you have a question or comment? Would you like to speak up?
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Nanda, thank you. I was very enlivened to listen to you. I heard your name many times. I have never met you, seen you, so I'm happy.
Hare Krishna. Where are you located, Annette?
I'm in Switzerland.
Switzerland. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So I have a question about, you mentioned that here we get a different understanding of Adhyatma, Adhidaiva, and Adhibhutam. And that there is another understanding or another explanation of it. So I don't know that other explanation. Okay. So I'm curious to.
Okay, thanks. I actually had intended to explain it at that point, but I got derailed, my thought process. So thanks for bringing that up. So, okay, it's just like Atma. When we hear the word Atma, right? The Atma has many different meanings to it. Atma means soul. Atma means body, you know, and also the Atma is referred to as the mind. So it depends on how it's used in a sentence or how it's translated. So similarly, Adiyatma, or here I'm going to go according to what's mentioned. So first in the purport is mentioned Adidaiva. So normally these three terms, or I'll say not normally, I'll say more commonly. How's that? More commonly, these three terms, Adidaiva, Adibhotik, and Adiatmic, are referred to different miseries that the living entity, us, in our existence, we go through. And so one of the miseries is caused by Daiva, the demigods. The Daiva. So what would be a misery caused by the Daiva? Too much rain, or maybe in your case in Switzerland, too much snow. You know, things that are beyond our control, nature, the forces of nature. Or here in the States, you're probably quite aware that there's, in the western part of the country, there's huge wildfires destroying vast amounts of land. Then there's floods, and you know, and then there was a earthquake. So these are Daiva. These are by the controllers of the universe. Okay, out of our hands. We can't. Although modern scientists wants to tout that they can control these things, it's totally beyond their control. Okay, so that's Adi Daiva. So miseries caused by the demigods. Then Adi and let me just see which was mentioned next in the okay, Adi Bhutam. Wait, Adiyatma. Okay, let's go here. Adi Daiva, Adiyatma. The Adiyatma are miseries. Atma means the self. It also means the mind and this, what I mean. So in this sense, the Adiyatma miseries are the miseries that I create in my own mind. I'm not good enough. I'm not, oh, this person is putting me in anxiety. Oh, I just, you know, oh, I just had a fight with this and that. So those are the miseries, my own miseries. I brought them on myself, or they're in my mind that I'm making them. So Adiyatma. And Adi Daiva, Adiyatma, and Adi Bhotam. And Adi Bhotam are referred to, Malini, did I get that right? Did I just say that wrong? And Adi Bhutam, I think, are the miseries of the body. Am I saying it right?
Adibhotika, my understanding is the misery coming from other people. Like
Okay.
The Bhagavatam can upload all the threefold misery, Adidaivika, Adibhotika, and Adiatmika.
Yeah.
But like in grammatical, it say Adibhotika, and I wonder if the ka make it that it's becoming, instead of going passive, it's becoming active, you know, like Prabhupada sometimes speak about the different, you know, like how the Sanskrit make different things, active or passive, or
coming from other persons, like when we're having difficulties in relationships or whatever, they're coming from outside. Yeah, I just didn't want to. So it's in relation to Annette's question. These are different miseries that are created, that we experience all the time, the categories of miseries. And but here it's giving an expanded explanation of them. Do you want to continue, Malini? Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that? This discussion, this part?
I really appreciate how clear you made it for everyone. I really appreciated the way how clear you made it for everyone, and also how clear you made it that, you know, like even if we understand it or we are able to repeat it, like the pure devotee, like it's amazing to see Srila Prabhupada's purport on those verses.
Yeah.
When I read the Srila Prabhupada's purport on those verses, I can really like, Prabhupada understands some things that I may not even understand with 1,000 years.
Yeah.
His purport are so clearly telling us, like, yeah, for him, it's like swimming in it.
Yes. Amazing, isn't it? It's totally amazing. We can appreciate.
Yeah, it's completely flabbergasted, like, ooh.
Yeah.
But one thing that's interesting to me is yesterday I was listening to a chapter of the seventh canto. It's called Behavior of the Perfect Person, I believe. You know,
Yeah, Narada Muni talking.
Yeah, Narada Muni speaking about Vanaprastha, and then how the Vanaprastha kind of that old system that you explain, how we unfold it. He put back the air into the ether, into the whole thing. And I was thinking, oh, maybe that's why in the third canto it goes so, second canto is so deeply there, because the perfect person unfold those things, give back the eyes, give back the nose, give back the air of the body, give back the fire of the body, and unfold everything little by little. So I was just fascinated by that.
Yeah, totally. So I have two comments on your comment. So even in this very purport here, this text 18 in the purport, so the verse is talking about the mouth and the palate manifesting and the tongue being generated. And then Srila Prabhupada does exactly what you just explained there. In the purport, he's talking about, this implies that Varuna is in charge. He's also manifest. Now, the verse doesn't say anything about Varuna, but somebody who totally understands what's going on, has complete realization, then he can, it's a seamless link for him. And it's manifest right there. And I can't go three inches away from the purport without reading it because I can barely remember from one point to the next, and this is why in the beginning when we offered our respects to Srila Prabhupada, because without his purports, how would we understand any of this its way? And then now here you guys have to stay with your seatbelts on and stay in tune with your Bhagavatam study. And then when you get to the third canto, the creation is going to be explained from another perspective, not even in the same way. I mean, it's similar, but it's different. It's a different perspective, a different take on it, because it's a different, it starts looking at the creation from a different point, and it appears, superficially, it appears to be different than what's explained in the second canto, but it is obviously the same process of creation, but from different angles of vision. And that's the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam, some of the glories of Bhagavatam. And the glories of Bhagavatam is that it brings us all to Krishna's lotus feet, the shelter, the summum bonum, the ashraya of everything. And Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam, Pavitram idam uttamam, Prakyakshavagam mam dharmyam, Shushu kam kartam avyayam. This knowledge, this transcendental knowledge, it's the king of knowledge, it's the king of all knowledge, it's the most secret, and it's perfect. But you and I can tap in and get realization on the level that we're at. It's not that we have to wait for some understanding until we get our PhD in Bhagavatamology. You know what I mean? But even in our beginning stages, even so, when we were talking about just now you were talking about how the creation, some details of the creation and everything, but in specific the instance of the Vanaprastha amalgamating the senses into the this, into the that, and all gets amalgamated, and I have to go to the dictionary and even look up what the word amalgamated means, because I don't even understand what the word means. But anyway, what the concept means. And before I say that, I better get back to my point, because I'm going to forget my point. Oh yeah, but by Lord Chaitanya's mercy, yay, Lord Chaitanya, thank you. He's given us something that with our limited capacity, and I'm sure your capacity isn't as limited as mine, but even with our limited capacity, we can take the chanting of Hare Krishna and make progress and feel that reciprocation, even in our simple attempt to offer a flower to Srila Prabhupada and offer our food and offer our chanting and try to read the Bhagavatam. We can shushu kam kartam avyaya. It's directly perceived by the individual soul. We don't need somebody else telling us that we're feeling happy because we chanted Hare Krishna. We can perceive it and continue to go on and make progress. And that's totally amazing. That's totally amazing. And then back to the Gita, then how that ties into the information in the Gita when it talks about karma, jnana, and bhakti. The process of karma and jnana are so detailed, and especially the process of jnana, that the entrance level to become a jnani means you have to first take sannyas. First you take sannyas, reject the world, and then you can start to be, study gyan. And like, where would we be? We wouldn't even consider that, but Lord Chaitanya has given us this process. Just chant Hare Krishna, it's the Maha Mantra, and all of that is gradually revealed. Ladini, what would you like to add to this?
So I would like to add that, like, during this conversation between yourself and Mother Malini, I feel like when a child from like primary school or maybe kindergarten comes to the university, and then there are the students at the university and they speak about like subject, and the child is like, what? But then like seeing the students like really excited, like seeing like, wow, this like students at the university are so excited about the subject matter. It's like seems really cool. So that's my experience, like hearing the two of you. And it's really sweet, but I really don't understand much.
Yeah, don't worry, I don't understand much either. But but anyway, thank you for that. Yeah, and another thing is too, another way to look at that example, because I've thought of that in a different way, how a little child can go into the first grade and perhaps someone will say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And perhaps the child says, let's just say, I want to be a doctor. And okay, well, welcome to kindergarten. Welcome to the first grade. Go through the thing and then gradually you'll get there. No, I want to be a doctor right now. Well, it doesn't really happen that way. So we have to, again, like I was saying in the beginning, we have to make our endeavor. And our endeavor can be, and that's what we can do. You know what I mean? We can make that endeavor. We can keep up with our vows of chanting. We can keep up with making an offering or reading the Bhagavatam or whatever. We can make that endeavor. And when Krishna sees that endeavor, he's pleased. He's so pleased by that. And just like our introductory prayers on the Bhagavatam, by hearing the Bhagavatam, one becomes purified, and and that purification in the heart is established as an irrevocable fact. Never can be taken away. It can never be taken. Whatever little progress we've made, it can never be taken away, in spite of the fact that there might be setbacks materially or spiritually, in our life. There might be setbacks, but the progress is there, always in our transcendental bank account. So therefore, I find that very encouraging. So perhaps, we're reading this and we understand little teeny weeny bit, but it's encouraging because I can go to what gives me strength or what encourages me the most. Perhaps it's chanting, perhaps it's reading different sections of the Bhagavatam or whatever, or hearing Prabhupada's lectures. Go to what enlivens you the most. If it's kirtan, practice that, do that, make another little effort, go beyond another step in your effort to enhance that experience. And then when you come back to these things, even in another month of after having chanted Hare, you'll get more things from it, because Bhagavatam is living. It's living scriptures. All Bhagavatam Gita, it's all living scriptures. Krishna's there. He's incarnated in the form of we're never alone. That's so nice. We're never alone. We have to make our endeavor, but we're never alone. And he's there within the Bhagavatam. He's there within his holy name. He's there within the deity form on our altars. And he's just waiting for us to turn to him. And we can grasp that and go forward from there. Any other comments or questions? Because I have, yes, Malini D.
Thank you, Mozo Nanda. I love your class. I hope you give many, many, many more.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
yeah, Bhakta is in agreement and they are too. And I really appreciate the point that you made about how the Bhagavatam, the beginning of the Bhagavatam is there to open our mind. And I really appreciated that because, yeah, first time reading Bhagavatam, it's really interesting how it's attractive, like you say, so attractive, and it's so relishable, and it's so beyond what the person can comprehend because the man is not trained in any way. And now the Bhagavatam, of course, there is all those stories in the first canto, so the stories kind of keep us entertained. And at the same time, that opening of the mind is quite, I really like that point you made. And recently I'm reading the third canto, and what you say, like in the third canto, there is again the creation, the secondary creation is mainly expanded on. And Maitreya Rishi, where he starts, is to say, it's not about understanding. You're not going to understand. It's about hearing. It's about hearing. And he makes that distinction, like 3 or 4 verses where Maitreya Rishi made distinction between like reading to understand and try to control the knowledge. And he said, no, that's not what it is about. What it is about, it's about hearing.
That's a really great point. Thanks for saying that.
And I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. We hear and we don't know why we are fascinated. And while I was reading like that chapter is like calculation of time by the atom, something like that. Yeah. And then in the past, my scientific brain was like, oh, I want to control that. I want to understand it. And somehow my brain doesn't compute time and space. It just triggers me, like I cannot understand the connection between time and space. And so in the past, reading that chapter, I will be like kind of experience frustration, mainly. And this time around, because of Maitreya Rishi said, it's not about understanding, it's about hearing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's you're speaking about, of like just being in that experience of reading that chapter, not understanding anything, and being completely in a fascinated kind of state of relishing reading that chapter. And I couldn't tell you anything about that chapter.
Yes. But you're making another very good point. And so what's the takeaway from that point? The takeaway from that point is right from our very beginning in Krishna consciousness, if we train ourselves to read, train to try to get a taste for reading, that's it. And it requires practice. It requires endeavor. It's not it doesn't come, in this, life is busy. You've got so many different responsibilities pulling at you from all directions. But if we set our priority, just like what you're doing, you're setting your priority that certain time of the day, certain days, this is my priority, and then I can go about my duty. So if we can set a priority that we read, however you can fit it into your schedule. I've often shared that in the past, when I would read, it was just like read the Bhagavatam, I'd be like, la, 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 it was hard. It was very hard. But what helps me now is I have reading groups. So if that's possible, even 1 or 2 persons, you read with them. So then that and it's like a designated time. If it works, it's just a suggestion to put in the mix of your life. If you can read with 1 or 2 persons, and then, you'll find it's an enhanced experience. Anyway, it's just little thing. This is, again, we're making our endeavor. How does your endeavor how do you manifest your endeavor? You know, think of ways to try to manifest, but make that simple endeavor. You have another thing to say, Malini? Okay. Anyone else?
Besides, thank you. It's very, I'm relishing every part of it.
Thank you. Thank you. When I looked at the verse, my immediate reaction was, oh no. You just have to speak from where you can speak from. What can you say, right? Anyway, thank you. If there's, if you're okay, I'm okay. Bhagavatam's okay. And I'll go on with our day if unless you want to have a further discussion or any specific points. Anyway, thank you very kindly for this opportunity.
And Nandini has her hand raised.
Does she? Oh,
Yeah.
Nandini, and I'm calling her Annette. Sorry. Haribola, Nandini, I didn't see your hand, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. I appreciate a lot your energy and the aliveness when you speak about Srimad Bhagavatam. I get that this is like a house you live in and you're exploring all the corners in a prayerful mood. So I get a lot of inspiration from that. Thank you.
Thank you for your encouragement, because we all need encouragement. Thank you very kindly for your encouragement. And I hope that I can stay in that house and explore all the little corners with your kind blessings. Thank you for your blessings earlier and association. So thank you. Yeah, it is enlivening. And you know what's enlivening? Here, okay. I don't have anything else to say, but I have one more thing to say. What's another thing that'll help us when we read the Bhagavatam, then you tell somebody else what you read. Even if you're in a group, that's one thing. But after you read it, tell somebody else what you read, because then you'll see very quickly points that you know, like if it's a story, you'll tell the story, and then you'll think, well, did that happen next? And you'll go back and check it, and it will become more solid in your comprehension. You'll see what you could understand and what you need to review or whatever, and it helps. So speaking also is a blessing too. So, you know, however that happens. Thanks, Anandini. Hare Krishna. Is that all from everyone? I can't see everybody all at once. Let me see if there's any more hands or whatever. Okay. All right. So I am going to, with your kind permission, beg your leave at this particular point. And thank you for the opportunity, and forgive all my shortcomings, which are great, but let's give our glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Vansakalpa, Trubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnava.
Thank you, Mother Nanda. It was appreciable. Please come back again.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
We have every weekend, we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at least, and sometimes we do more programming every week. But
that's wonderful. Thank you very kindly. All the best to you. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.